having this in an approachable, understandable way that looks at every aspect made me feel like I have a little bit better handle on this now.
There's a lot of information in here about finding communities and how important that is, and often people feel like I got to handle this myself, and you just can't.
I think we have our quote. Hey, I'm Greg Grunberg, and welcome to Talk About It, the podcast where we focus on topics that everybody should be talking about, and hopefully they will, or not only talking about, but screaming about.
Epilepsy shouldn't keep you from doing anything that you want to do.
Talk about it. Talk about it. Talk about it.
This season, we are going to continue to talk about living with epilepsy, like my son and millions of Americans who do. We're also going to be looking at other related conditions and causes. Our goal is to knock down, drag out, eliminate stigma, and raise awareness. Oh, and hopefully have a laugh or two along the way. Each of our episodes will feature amazing advocates and champions. We will learn together how to make a real difference in our own lives and in the lives of our communities.
Talking about it is important. It's all about connecting.
Talk about it.
Talk about it.
Talk about it.
Talk about it. Talk about it.
Talk about it.
Thank you for talking about it.
Thank you for talking about it.
New season, new look, new sponsor. Thank you to Neurelis and everyone at Neurelis for sponsoring Talk About It. Talk About It is also sponsored by Jazz Pharmaceuticals. Thank you, Jazz, for always being there for us. All right, let's jump right into this episode of Talk About It. Okay, it's part two. If you listened to the last episode, if you haven't, go back now and listen to it, okay? Right now, go back. Lauren Aguirre and Dr. Elizabeth Thiele, they wrote Epilepsy for Dummies. This book is incredible. If you haven't pre-ordered it now, there's a link. You have to do it. If you've ever been sitting there going, I just don't know what that means or this means, or I'm so overwhelmed by the epilepsy world. I just heard that we're diagnosed with epilepsy, my child, or you have so many questions. You might be a teacher, you might be a friend, a relative, and you want to learn about epilepsy. This is how you do it. This is empowering, and it's done in a way that's easy to digest. Get this book, Epilepsy for Dummies. This is part two with Lauren Aguirre and Dr. Elizabeth Thiele. This book, Epilepsy for Dummies, don't let the word dummies fool you, okay? We're not talking about dummies. It's just, that's the series, right? You've seen the books. But this is just the most understandable version of what we all need to know. Everything we need to know up to this point about epilepsy is in this book in a very friendly way that you can learn, which is empowering for all of us. And we talked about it, you're going to have to come out with version 2 very quickly, I would imagine, because of how quickly everything is changing with therapies and medication and devices and all of it, right? Have you talked about possible follow-up to this book?
We just finished it, so
I'm still recovering.
Get back in there. You get back in there and finish your homework. Oh, man. Okay. Well,
I will say there's a lot in here that isn't going to change in terms of taking agency and not being afraid and being sure to talk about it. And also, one whole part is devoted to learning well with epilepsy. How do you overcome whatever challenges you might have as a result of having seizures? And that's, good old-fashioned teaching and having a team of people who work with caregivers and people with epilepsy and educators. So that doesn't really change.
And what was really cool was having our different perspectives on this, being a healthcare provider versus someone living with epilepsy, with family members with epilepsy, is you mentioned earlier, Greg, about kind of going to the doctor and what information do you need, et cetera, et cetera. And Lauren thought that was an important thing to include. So, we have a chapter in there on how to prepare for your first visit with the neurologist, et cetera, and what to expect with the relationship. So I think it's cool to have this pretty significant medical disorder looked at comprehensively from two different perspectives.
And in part one, you talked about this, but I can't believe, I'm literally thinking of this with jealous eyes. I do this all the time when I see a great TV show or read a great book. I'm like, how did I not think of this? This is one of those things that I really cannot believe hasn't been made already. So thank you for doing it. If there is one chapter, do you think that's the chapter that people need to, focus on? I'm not discouraging people from reading the whole book, but, preparing for a doctor's visit. I love that that's a chapter, but what chapter stands out to each one of you as the most important? Lauren as a patient and caregiver, and then also Elizabeth as a doctor?
I'm going to go with chapter 1 because it's going to give you the whole bird's eye view of what's in the book. But it's also what's the most important chapter is going to depend on who you are and what you're bringing to it and what you're looking for. If you're thinking that your kid has seizures, you're probably going to want to read how to prepare for the visit. But if you've been living with it for a while, or you're going off to college for the first time, you're going to want to read the chapter on how to manage that transition to adulthood.
Or if the medications haven't been working and you want to think about other therapies, the chapter on dietary therapy, the chapter on epilepsy surgery. I would agree with Lauren. Chapter 1, I think, is really important. But I think they're all really important. And that's what I like about the Wiley's approach to this series is they don't necessarily intended to sit down and read from page 1, throughout. You go and find out what you need at the time. And that might be something today. It might be something else next week. So I like the organization of these books in that way.
Now, you just mentioned dietary, and I know you have a lot of experience in that, which is, I want to talk about it because, everybody hears about the ketogenic diet, and we had Jim Abrams on, who we miss dearly. For people that don't know, the ketogenic diet is a very restrictive diet, and you have to do it under a doctor's care and nurse's care. But there are elements of that diet that I think everybody could adhere to, and we see it with Jake. Just talk to me about how what you eat really does impact your brain. And in our family, we say, that seizures need sugar. Seizures need bad starches and bad, it's just, we try and eat, and Jake eats so healthily. It's unbelievable. I mean, he really is very strict in a good way, gets salads and doesn't eat any bread or, just pasta or white potatoes, where he'll have sweet potatoes. He'll have this, but how important is it?
I think diet is wicked important. And I ask whenever I teach classes, courses in epilepsy, how many kids had a lecture on nutrition in medical school? Very few. And I think we're learning not only with epilepsy, and this is the 100th anniversary of the ketogenic diet for epilepsy. And kind of over the past 20 years, a couple of less restrictive diets have kind of been developed, including one we developed at the MGH, low glycemic index treatment, that appear as effective as the classic ketogenic diet. But what's been very exciting is watching that these dietary therapies are becoming useful medical therapies outside of epilepsy. Big areas of interest now are cancer and also psychiatry. So it's pretty clear that nutrition matters and what we eat matters. And if people ask us, short of going on a restrictive diet and really limiting carbs, what would you do?
Yeah.
I would say exactly what Jake does. I would avoid refined sugars and starches. And I think that what we eat clearly does matter for our health.
I think we all see it. I've talked about this on the podcast before, but, I've been battling my weight my whole life. And if I went, like right now, I'm eating health, I'm eating right and doing what I want to do. I'm, getting my steps in, working out. And I just built a garden. I'm very proud of it. I'm just going to say it right now. Elizabeth and I have a little raised garden in the backyard.
And right now I'm showing a picture of it for the viewers.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. Really proud of it. But when I cheat or when I, have ice cream or a donut or whatever, there's just this, I just want to sit on the couch and veg out. And so it affects your brain. I mean, absolutely that stuff affects your brain. And maybe it's because I don't have it as often and then I do. But have you noticed, Lauren, with, your kids and with you, a difference when you're eating, more so than just the average person because, epilepsy does run in your family?
Well, I guess I can't say whether I notice it more than anyone else because it's just me.
Right.
But that does kind of remind me of, there's nothing great about having epilepsy. However, I think it has made a huge difference in terms of when you have epilepsy, you have to be disciplined and you have to take care of your health and you have to get organized and make sure you take your medication. So I just feel like, maybe people with epilepsy don't get enough credit for that, but it makes a big difference in their life. They sort of have to grow up sooner and become more functional in some ways than other people. They have to, in a way, adult sooner.
Right. No, that's absolutely true. And think about things that they, when we're young, we feel like we're invincible and we can do anything we want. And, but you can't. You have to think about more than you normally would. But I think with any condition, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be epilepsy. It's other things too. So because we're in part 2 of this interview, how long did it take you, the two of you, to go, all right, we're doing this. Because I don't know if you're procrastinators or whatever, but I just want to just speak to finishing a book. I mean, I don't know if this is the first, you guys have done this before, but this is a big deal. It's like, and you're a little busy, Elizabeth. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff going on. You too, Lauren. Like, how and when did you find the time to actually do this?
So Lauren, I think, asked me about this last fall, and it had always been a dream of mine. For years, I used to walk bookstores looking at all the books on ADHD, all the books on diabetes, wondering where all the books on epilepsy were. And it has been a dream of mine my whole career to have something like this, to work on something like this. So when Lauren approached me about doing this, it was honestly like a dream. And I think Lauren feels the same way. When we started getting into this, Wiley has a pretty tight timeline. And I do have about an 80-hour-a-week job as it is. And I remember telling Lauren, I said, I just don't think I can do this.
And I was like, no, you can do it.
We're doing it. It's called AI. We don't have to do anything. We'll just let AI write it. No, it's just so clear, the care that you and the time that you put into this. I mean, it's not just, well, we're just going to put a bunch of things and sort of put it into a book form. It's just so needed in our community. That's the biggest takeaway for me.
Not only that, but the scope of what you have to talk about. I do a lot of video editing, and I'll have a couple hours of footage I have to fit into a 10-minute video. To take the entire universe of epilepsy and refine it into, how did you decide what information goes? Was there battles over that? Because you have to get it into something that is digestible and readable for the average person.
And did the publisher have any input? Like, did you get notes?
No notes. They reviewed the table of contents. So, they signed off on that. But, I think they recognize that the experts are the experts. They know what the audience needs, and what they're great at is like, how do you organize this in a Dummies fashion? Because that's a very specific sort of template. And is your language, accessible enough?
Right.
Yeah, they sent us writing a Dummies book for dummies when we started this journey, because it's a different kind of writing that I had done before than Lauren had done before. I'm happy to say I don't think we ever fought. I don't think we had strong disagreements. I think, again, going into this, I quickly realized this is why there has never been one. Because if you look at Parkinson's disease, that's a disease. Alzheimer's is one of many types of dementia, but it's a disease, whereas epilepsy is a symptom of thousands of diseases.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's just a big amount to take on. But I think we did a pretty good job. I'm pretty proud. I mean, it was stressful doing it. Not only Lauren, but my family, my coworkers kept saying, "You're going to be glad you did this. You're going to be glad you did this."
Yeah.
And then just seeing the proofs, I'm really wicked glad that we did this, because I think it's going to help a lot of people.
I love it.
Yeah.
Did you get a couple wickeds in the book?
I don't know. That's a Boston thing.
We should have. That's such a good idea.
Okay, wait till you see my
no.
review. Wait till you see the review I write on Amazon.
This
and other
doctor is
places.
wicked smart.
Yeah, so wicked. This is wicked. First of all, chapter 1, wicked.
Second edition. It'll be in the second edition.
Exactly. Yeah.
So for a kid that grew up in Arkansas, I'm very impressionable. So it's being in Boston this long, wicked is almost in every other sentence.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
Coming up on Talk About It.
If I was a teacher in a first grade class and one of your students is going to have epilepsy, a person with epilepsy, a parent of a person with epilepsy, I would want this book.
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
All right, Nick, I have a question for you, because I am entrenched in this. I am part of this community.
And I'm a dummy.
By the way, I've been using that as a description for you for years.
Yeah, I know.
Behind your back.
Yeah.
In all these years they've been doing the podcast now, and not just because you're family, but before you were introduced to Jake or us, I know you knew about epilepsy. People know about seizures, but what is something that you have learned, like, man, I was really a dummy back then because I thought this. Like, what for you?
Every episode I learned something new. I think the biggest overarching theme that I'm no longer a dummy about is that there isn't, like, epilepsy is a group, it's an umbrella of a lot of things. And going back to episodes like with Michael T. King, when he wrote his book and his seizures manifested in that way where he would kind of do the whooping sound.
That was a learning experience for me.
And you talked about Jake and how the different, there's the grand mal seizures, but then there's just kind of this staring, like I wouldn't have been aware of that prior to meeting you, prior to doing this podcast. In all the years I've known you and Jake, I've never experienced a seizure with Jake. Not that I don't want to or wouldn't know what to do, but it's just...
Did you know what to do before we started doing the podcast?
No, that's another thing. Because you talk about it all the time, which is why you have this podcast, which is why you're trying to get this message out. I am now somebody who can go out and teach people what to do. Or if I see it on the street, if I see, wherever I am, I know how to handle it.
Right.
You always hear about, raise awareness. And what is awareness? Well, this is awareness. This is the point of
And
awareness.
if you're getting it,
yeah,
we're really reaching the dummies. What do you hope that people living with epilepsy are going to take away from it? Just simply. I mean, obviously they're going to take a lot from it, but what do you hope that people, the first thing they see, what they see you and they know you wrote the book, you want them to say what?
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power, and that maybe because I have access to this, I could take a deep breath. Because I think it's scary. I mean, I think if I had epilepsy or if my child had epilepsy, it's terrifying. And yes, we're surrounded by information. We can tap on the internet for anything, but it's also easy to get misinformation, to get scared, to even more fearful. So I think just having this in an approachable, understandable way that looks at every aspect, from having seizures to what causes seizures, what are the types of seizures, how do you treat seizures, how they impact your learning, what is seizure first aid, what do you tell your friends? I think I would say, okay, I maybe feel like I have a little bit better handle on this now. And like Lauren said, knowledge is power.
And I think also knowing that you're not alone. It's easy to feel like you have to do this on your own.
Yep.
But I think, there's a lot of information in here about finding communities and how important that is. And often people feel like I got to handle this myself, and you just can't.
I think we have our quote. I mean, that is what Talk About It is all about.
How many times do you say that?
I say it all the time.
At least once an episode. It's like mirrored what your message is and what the message of this podcast is.
Yeah, it's just like you said, Lauren. I mean, knowledge is power, and this is. But it is knowing that you're part of a community, because it feels so isolating. When you're holding your child having a seizure and there's nothing you can do except say, come on, it's okay, it's going to stop, knowing. When I was holding Jake when he was younger and he's having a seizure, I'm like, I know he can't hear me right now, except, it's so funny. Do you still do this with kids? Like, Dr. Smith at Rush would go, Mickey Mouse, Jake, Mickey Mouse. He would say something to see how deep the seizure went, so that when Jake came out of it, Jake would be like, why'd you keep saying Mickey Mouse? Or if he didn't hear it at all, wow. It's interesting. Do you do that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, we still do that.
Yeah, it's great.
It gives us a sense of, how is the seizure spreading, et cetera, if people are, yeah. But I always tell parents, just assume, even if you think the person is, not responsive, just try to be calm and reassuring. Because I think we don't know at what level someone can perceive that. And I think it's important to try and have that be rather than panicking, to try and stay calm and speak soothingly to the person having the seizure.
Yeah, and I can see it sometimes when I'm talking to him. He's not trying to fight it or trying to get out of it, but he can hear me. He's just like looking at me. He's still either postictal or he's still in the seizure, and hearing somebody. That's what scares caregivers, scares us about. Jake's upstairs. His bedroom is away from our bedroom, and now he has a girlfriend, and so he has somebody with him. But for years, it's like with kids. We talked about this in the last episode, but having them alone, that's what's terrifying, because you can't hear the seizure. And by the way, for dummies, we're all dummies. There are so many kinds of seizures. It's not what you see on TV and film. It's not the tonic-clonic or the shaking seizure. Sometimes it's a mood swing. Sometimes this is the brain we're talking about. Read Epilepsy for Dummies, guys. Get your hands on this book, because you'll learn so much. There's so much to learn. You don't have to be a part of the epilepsy community. Everybody needs to read this book. It's just so important. Let me ask you, because this is a burning question. We all learn from experts on social media. Everybody's an expert, and and they're not doctors and they're not epileptologists, and people. Elizabeth, a patient or a caregiver, a parent comes in and says, I saw this thing that coconuts are really good for seizures. Like, what do? Do you say, I mean, I'm sure you listen to them and you're like, you have to appreciate that they've done research, that they're looking for answers. But do you roll your eyes? Is that the first, I mean, inside your head maybe without showing it?
I really try not to, because I understand that this of wanting to do anything you can to figure out how to help your family member with epilepsy.
Good, yeah.
And I think that's important. It's actually, the past 14 years of my life, a lot of the time was spent helping develop CBD as a treatment for epilepsy.
Yeah.
And that all started by listening to families who came in desperate for effective treatments for their child or for their family member.
Yeah.
But I try to guide people, because I think, if I was desperate looking for anything, I'd be willing to listen to anything, to try anything. So I think part of my responsibility is helping people figure out, is that a reasonable thing to consider? And my group spends a lot of time looking into that. Recently, we've been looking into different treatments available outside the United States because families have been interested in them. And I know how to treat with the tools I have, but I think it's my responsibility, if someone asks a question about some other possible therapy, do my due diligence. Is that something that's legitimate, safe, well tolerated, and possibly effective?
Yeah, and by the way, us caregivers sit up at night, and we scroll and we find stuff. There must be times, and I'm not expecting you to remember now, but where somebody actually mentions something and you go, oh, that's interesting. And then you look into it and there is some validity to it, or it does lead you to some other conclusion or something, right?
Oh, definitely. No, I always tell medical students and residents, when you're taking care of patients, whatever field you go into, while you're treating them, always take a few steps back and figure out what they're trying to teach you. I think it helps guides medicine moving forward.
I'm going to ask you a TSC question, just because I
Yes.
know how important that is to you. You've done groundbreaking research and work especially in TSC and epilepsy. What excites you the most about the current research that's being done with TSC?
So tuberous sclerosis complex, or TSC, is a genetic disorder that affects probably at least 1 in 6,000 people, probably more common than we know. And about 85% of people with tuberous sclerosis develop epilepsy. 2/3 of the time it's refractory. Unlike the general epilepsy population, where refractory epilepsy or seizures that don't respond easily to medication is about 1/3. I think what's really exciting for me about the world of TS is that it can affect every organ system, not just the brain. And I think it's an amazing medical community where all the specialists, the patient advocacy group, the TSC Alliance, all work together to try and advance our understanding of TS and better treatments for people living with it. One of the things I've been very happy with the past couple of years is mental health issues are very common in people with TS and largely underrecognized, undertreated, underdiagnosed. And there's been increasing emphasis on that. And an acronym now, TAN, TSC-associated neuropsychiatric disorders. And so a lot of focus is being placed on that. And I think that is really important for people living with TS. I also think it's really important for people living with epilepsy. Well, I have been super focused on tuberous sclerosis my life. It's part of it is thinking, well, this is not only taking care of people with TS, but this can be a model system for other people living with epilepsy for other reasons. And as you know, people with epilepsy are at high risk for comorbid mental health issues. So I think what we learn about those issues in TS can hopefully be generalizable to the wider epilepsy community.
Lauren, how many times, because you mentioned refractory, and I was like, okay, well, since we're Epilepsy for Dummies, what does that mean?
I was going to say, I need a Talk About It podcast for dummies on that answer.
Yeah. No, I'm breaking in here because this is exactly what we're all talking about. So first of all, give me the definition of that. And then also, Lauren, how many times did you go, okay, we need to simplify this even more. You know how people go, talk to me like I'm 7.
Yeah.
Talk to me like I'm 5. I mean, where did you get to the level where you go, okay, this is simple enough. People get it.
Actually, Dr. Thiele is really good at simplifying because she speaks to parents and kids all the time.
Right.
So I really don't think there were a lot of instances where I said, this is too high level.
But what refractory means, Greg, or intractable, is that, 50%, when people new onset epilepsy, about 50% respond to the first medication. So that's the good news. The not so good news is not everybody does. And about 1/3 of people will develop what we call refractory seizures. And those are seizures that do not easily respond to anti-seizure medications.
Okay, yeah.
So in the epilepsy community, we use that term if people don't respond to 2 appropriate anti-seizure medications. And that's because now we have treatments other than medications. And if it looks like medicines aren't going to work, then it's important to start thinking about, well, if these aren't going to work, what would? And then again, the possibility of diet, neuromodulation, surgery, etc.
Yeah.
Coming up on Talk About It.
I'm always amazed by how many people will say, oh, my kid has seizures, but they don't have epilepsy. And it's like, well, if they're repeatedly having seizures.
Yeah, and don't be scared by that.
I think realizing what epilepsy is and what it isn't is really important, especially for people just starting out on the journey.
At the beginning of this journey, we knew nothing about it. We didn't have epilepsy in our family or anything. And we didn't know that there were 1,000 different kinds of seizures. I mean, I'm just throwing that number out.
Genetic evolutions that could cause seizures.
Yeah,
or
but
however
also seizures. Like,
Yeah.
you there's the staring spell, there's the falling to the ground and having a seizure, but there's also memory loss, there's exhaustion, there's mood swings, it's the brain. We know so little about the brain that it could be a seizure. One thing leads to another. So if you don't get enough sleep, lack of sleep is a trigger. So it's just like so many different types of seizures will then explain if you go, oh, maybe that was a seizure. Oh, maybe it's because I didn't get enough sleep. Maybe, again, knowledge.
Does Jake display like a certain number of types of seizures, or can it be anything? Like you just don't know how it's going to manifest?
I think the latter, but as he got older and went through puberty and everything, now he's settled down. He works out, he eats right, he does all the things that gives himself a better shot. I mean, it takes time. It does take time, because one therapy that might work when he's younger or it doesn't work when he's younger, you can try it again later.
Yeah.
You're constantly chasing it, so you got to stay on top of it. Take your meds on time.
Yeah.
Take a nap if you need one. Get your sleep. Sleep is so important. He uses a sleep tracker. Jake sleeps with his watch. Yeah, it's great. I mean, Jake, he's on like 13,000 steps a day now, and he's Taekwondo and everything. I mean, I learned from him.
Yep.
Would he be as healthy if he didn't have epilepsy? I don't know. He might be more like me. People are listening to this or watching this, and they were just diagnosed, or their child was just diagnosed. They just heard the word epilepsy for the very first time. Yes, they should grab Epilepsy for Dummies, get that book. But what do you, Lauren, as the red phone for people, because I'm the red phone for people too, all of a sudden they'll be like, oh, my friend, their child, is it okay if they call? And I always say, you're wasting time. Give them my number now. And I know what I say, but what is the first thing that you tell people?
Try to get a doctor who listens to you.
That's a really good one. Absolutely. I haven't heard that until now. And that's maybe the most important one. So elaborate on that, because all doctors listen. They all listen to you. But you're talking about really hear you.
Really listen, open-minded, just like Elizabeth has been talking about, because patients and caregivers know things that doctors just aren't going to know. And it's also the peace of mind. I mean, you can't really quantify the effect on someone's health outcome of just feeling like, okay, I'm getting the best care that there is. But it does make a difference just feeling that way.
Yeah. Elizabeth, what do you think? What's the first thing you tell people?
Right now would be to get this book.
Yeah.
Because I spend an hour with new patients, and I remember once, I can be a little bit melodramatic, and I remember once telling one of my superiors that if I had a 5-year-old in the office with a new onset seizure, and if the kid left the office on a medication and never had another seizure, but if I didn't explain epilepsy to that child in that family, I could still have a handicapped child living in that office. So I think it's understanding, and knowledge, again, knowledge is power. So I think that's why I'm really excited about this book. I think it matters. I think if I heard the word, if I was a teacher in a first grade class and one of your students is going to have epilepsy, I would want this book. I think it's a readable book. That's what I like. I like the Dummy series because none of us can be experts at everything. And I think that's what that implies, that you don't have to be.
Right.
And I think that demystifying, giving knowledge about something like epilepsy, which still has, even in 2025, in the United States and worldwide, a stigma attached to it.
The worst.
I think realizing what epilepsy is and what it isn't is really important, especially for people just starting out on the journey in whatever aspect. A person with epilepsy, a parent of a person with epilepsy, a teacher, a coach. I think it's an important aspect.
Yeah, so buy it. This is a great gift to give people around you. No, and I'm not joking about this. It's, if I wish we had this back in the day so I could say, hey, why don't you, to give it to a teacher, give it to a coach, give it to somebody so they can look it up. And also, it's a reference guide. When Jake was first diagnosed and when he was having seizures and you're just looking for knowledge. And if you go to the computer and you Google, epilepsy or seizure or this just happened, what does this mean? The worst of the worst comes to the top. I'm not saying you're not going to learn stuff, but you're going to get scared because that's what happens with the algorithm, right? Stuff boils to the top, and it's not always what you want to, not necessarily what you want to hear, but it's not laid out in a way that you can educate yourself and you can have proper perspective and go, okay, so I'm taking this information. This is how it's like. It's just it's overwhelming. That's why I tell people, don't Google, don't go. When people call me, first thing I say is, it's going to be okay. I don't know what level of okay it's going to be, but as a parent, it's going to be okay. But you need to arm yourself with knowledge. You really need to run, don't walk. And especially if they're in the first 7 years of life, if the kid, I'm like, you need to get this under control. The other thing I say is, and you've said this, Lauren, you said it, and Dr. Thiele, you said it, don't give up. There are so many things out there now, so many medications happening all the time, treatments, therapies. There's just so much knowledge that you can use to get an upper hand on all this and do your best to stop the seizures, even if you are refractory or if your child is difficult to treat. So it's really, really important. All right, I am going to throw some questions at you. Finish these sentences. I did this in the end of the last episode, but I have a few more. And if you each would answer, this would be great. Okay, one piece of advice I give every family is, Lauren?
Get treatment as soon as you can. If you have a suspicion that something's wrong, check it out.
Dr. Thiele?
Be hopeful. No, none of us have a crystal ball. I know where someone's path's going to lead them, but I think to be hopeful, and that the epilepsy won't be as impactful as some of them can, and also to get information. And I'm a big believer in patient community. So I think it's also very important. The patient advocacy groups, I think are very important. It's important to not feel like you're on the journey alone, like Lauren said.
Yeah, a la subscribe to talk about it. Okay. Now, by the way, these were all sent in. The most misunderstood aspect of epilepsy is?
There are a lot. I think that everyone that has a seizure has a tonic-clonic seizure, or that something's terribly wrong with your brain. A lot of people have epilepsy. A lot of people living with epilepsy are a lot smarter and more successful and creative than I'm ever going to be.
Hear, hear.
So I think it's just important to realize that epilepsy is very diverse and not one size fits all. And it's important, again, knowledge is power.
Okay. And as someone with epilepsy, Lauren, most misunderstood aspect of epilepsy is?
Well, this doesn't have to do with my being a person with epilepsy. I would say the difference between seizures and epilepsy, because you might have a seizure that's for some very specific provoked reason, a sudden fever, let's say, and that doesn't mean you have epilepsy. But if you have two or more, and it isn't some cause that can be addressed, like don't have fevers, let's say, then it is epilepsy. And, I'm always amazed by how many people will say, oh, my kid has seizures, but they don't have epilepsy. And it's like, well, if they're repeatedly having seizures, they have epilepsy.
Yeah, and don't be scared by that. It's okay. It really is. And people get scared by labels, and they don't want to. And by the way, it's just overwhelming. I get it. I mean, luckily, my partner, Elizabeth, is she's one that we have now a label. Let's attack this. Let's look into all the weapons that we have. Epilepsy for Dummies is a weapon, guys. Grab that book, and the link to pre-order is going to be here in the description. So you can pre-order the book right now, I would imagine, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, great.
Attention. This just in. The ebook version of Epilepsy for Dummies is now available for purchase. The electronic book, the ebook, the digital version of Epilepsy for Dummies, now available for purchase.
Final question. What one story from the book sticks out with you? that will always stick out with you? Is there one, either your favorite or you hope that it affects the most people or most people take from it?
My daughter's story, which I shared in here, which was she had a seizure in elementary school. She hadn't had one in a long time, and everyone was panicked. And she said, you know what, I think I should go back to school tomorrow with the nurse and go to every classroom and say, here's what happened to me, and here's what you should do.
Yes! Oh, that is so great. Wow. How proud were you when she did that?
So proud, and everyone in the school was like, yes, let's take care of her. It
I
was
love
awesome.
it. We had a similar situation. Jake was going to his middle school, and it was his first day of school. And we had planned to do an in-service or talk to all the teachers in their break room. And I was just going to do it. And that morning, I dropped him off, and I left, and my cell phone went off. And as a parent, when your cell phone goes off and it says school district, you're like, oh. And I went back, and he was laying there. He had cut his chin, like, when he hit the ground, and there's blood. They didn't want to touch him, whatever. Got him to the emergency room, stitched him up, and we were home. And then he goes, I said, I got to go back to the school. And my wife was like, you're still going to do that today? And he's like, I'm going with you. So here he was, just like your daughter. This is, when you just saw that, I got chills. And that, by the way, I just have to say, it's a testament to you as a parent that, she was like, oh yeah, let's talk about this. And like you said, the outcome in talking about it, the result is that everybody is like, great, now I know what to do and I want to help. Okay, so Dr. Thiele, what's your favorite story or part of the book?
I think my favorite part would be the patient stories. And, there's several kind of interspersed throughout the book because I think the knowledge is really important. The causes of epilepsy, treatments of epilepsy, all of that's really important, physiology. But I think hearing the patient stories and the patient journey, that's inspirational. And so I think, if you're thinking about something like epilepsy, which can be terrifying, to hear the inspirational stories like Lauren's, like Jake's, I think that will be very impactful for people. And it was for me. It is for me. It's one of the most gratifying aspects of my job is kind of seeing the patient journey on this.
Yeah.
And being part of it.
And there are only so many. You don't scale, right? This is a way that you do. And I can't thank you both enough for writing this book. And it's just so needed in our community. And, this is just the beginning of this book journey for you. You're going to hear about this forever because you did it. No one else is going to come out with Epilepsy for Dummies. You must get this book. Like you say, it's inspirational hearing other people, knowing you're not alone, but there is treatment, care, daily life, myth busting, fighting stigma. There's everything that you want to learn about, everything that we're all affected by in the epilepsy community is covered in the book. And it's just, thank you for coming on the show. The podcast. Thank you for writing it, and we're gonna turn to you again because dummies just keep having questions, and we're two dummies here. And by the way, again, don't be offended by that word. This is just part of the Dummies series of books, and this is one that is long overdue. So thank you again for being on.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Of course.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Talk About It with Greg Grunberg. Sponsored by Neurelis and by Jazz Pharmaceuticals. Thank you to our special guests for joining us, and thank you J.J. Abrams for the theme music that you're hearing right now. Talk About It is produced by Ken Lowenberg, Greg Grunberg, and Nick Marzok. Editing, directing, and incidental music by Nick Marzok. Go to talkaboutonvideo.com to watch these episodes, and as always, don't forget to talk about it. This podcast is a production of the Talk About It Company and Motel Podcasts.